The global COVID-19 pandemic has been met with a flood of clinical studies as health scientists seek the answer to saving lives. But good and responsible science has always taken time. So in a world where large randomized controlled trials and peer review normally take years, John Webb investigates how close we are to a treatment and whether the need for speed poses risks to the rigors of science.
It's been more than 3 months since the new coronavirus was declared a global emergency. Since then, it's become a full-blown crisis, causing social and economic upheaval on a grand scale. And underlying it all, the realization that there's really only one way out: a vaccine.
Start with the question that everyone is speculating about. When are we likely to have a vaccine? And
researchers at NYU have now started clinical trials.
Tonight, for overstretched health workers, families torn apart, and shuttered businesses, a glimmer of hope.
There are currently about 120 vaccines being researched in various countries. Some, like this one at the University of Oxford, are already being tested on humans. But a successful candidate, if we get one, is still a year away, probably more. Which is why I'm sitting at a desk in the middle of a farm track. If the wait's going to be that long, we may as well get used to a new way of doing things. And let's face it, there's nothing normal about the new normal. The new normal is an existence dictated by the need to keep a distance and to remain a little obsessive about hand hygiene. Age-old solutions to keeping a 21st century virus at bay.
The trajectory is very much dependent on what each of us do.
Professor Qureisha Abdul Karim is a globally respected AIDS researcher and one of the experts advising government on its COVID-19 response.
The hand sanitization, the social distance, the use of protective equipment, depending on where you are and the risk of exposure that you face. So that's what we have today. Let's call it today's vaccine in our hands that we can control and use.
It's a simple message, but ignoring it has grave consequences. Bruce Malado is a physics professor at WITS.
If you don't adhere to the rules and regulations of social distancing, what's going to happen is that the spread will be very fast. Elderly people and people with pre-existing conditions are going to die. And the economy is not going to be able to resume its activities at the same level.
Professor Malado, who led the team that built the complex models behind this COVID-19 dashboard, thinks we can avoid that nightmare scenario. But how we do it is itself quite sobering.
Or in the absence of pharmaceutical interventions that will ease or will reduce the time that people are sick with the virus, the leading factor that will determine the spread and whether we will hit a major second wave or not is adherence to social distancing, our non-pharmaceutical measures.
So the forecast would change, and so might government policy, if we could find something to treat or cure COVID-19.
Let's assume we find something that either protects or modifies the disease considerably so we can bring down the death rate. Governments want to get the economies back to work.
Professor Helen Rees is founder and executive director of the WITS Reproductive Health and HIV Institute.
We also recognize that if we're going to have a lot of serious diseases, that impacts on other diseases. People can't get into hospitals, can't get treatment, can't get looked after for other things. If we could find something that would then have that kind of widespread impact, then that would be certainly a bit of a game changer.
It's a vital point. As an example, Ireland just went an entire month without a single mammogram at its state testing agency. Cervical sample tests were down by 96%. Clearly, the hunt for a treatment is urgent. The World Health Organization alone lists more than 1,000 global studies and clinical trials looking at various aspects of COVID-19, including repurposing existing drugs researchers believe might target the virus. It's unprecedented. Thousands of scientists collaborating across borders.
What we're trying to do is to get many countries, many clinical trial sites to work together with a single protocol, a single outcome, common database that's a global database, so that as quickly as possible, we can actually generate the data that says which therapies work for severely ill people, other studies that will say which therapies will stop someone who's got mild symptoms from progressing to more serious symptoms, and a third set of studies which is saying which therapies and drugs will work to stop people becoming infected in the first place.
If social distancing and hand washing are the tried and tested, this is the 21st century response. The scale and pace of the trials stand in stark contrast to our decades-long battle against a different virus.
The rate at which we are learning about this epidemic is quite phenomenal. If you just contrast this to HIV, it took us 2 years to isolate the virus. It took us like another year before we had the first diagnostic test. It took us nearly a decade before we had treatment. Over 3 decades later, we're still trying to find a vaccine. So when you contrast that timeline to what we're seeing with SARS-CoV-2, it is astounding.
The studies cover every conceivable way this virus might be fought, including blood plasma from COVID-19 survivors and drugs used to fight other conditions like arthritis and even peptic ulcers. As unprecedented as the international collaboration is, Professor Abdul Karim advises caution. For the people who are perhaps holding on for what some are calling a silver bullet, what is the message to them?
I'd say dream on. There is no such thing as silver bullets. With HIV, we've learned that combination therapy was what helped us. And I have a feeling that we may need to start looking at something like that.
So not a wonder drug, but a cocktail of individual medicines all making contributions.
At the end of the day, we need decent science, and we need to be able to say out there to all populations, we can put our hands on our hearts as clinicians and as scientists to say, we really think that this shows promise. It might not be 100%, it might be 30, 40% effective, but we think that this will have some sort of disease-modifying impact.
The hunt for a treatment hasn't escaped controversy, but that hasn't always been the fault of the science. Take the anti-malaria drug hydroxychloroquine, for example.
If the people walking in prior to getting it, if they take it, it has a profound effect. Well, maybe it doesn't, maybe it doesn't. I don't want to wait 1.5 years to find out.
After a small and much criticized study, hydroxychloroquine was seized upon as a possible wonder drug in the battle against COVID-19. It was an endorsement it could have done without. It was a red flag, too, against valuing speed above science.
There are 3 things that we must bear in mind in our scientific endeavors. One is we don't know the answer. That's why we're doing the research. Secondly, when we do the research, there is no guarantee that the outcome will be what we want it to be. And 3, that when we do have an outcome, is that outcome going to be generalizable? If we rush with the very small studies and claim success, we may find that further along the way, that was, called it in too quickly, and we're actually causing harm.
Despite how quickly our understanding of this virus and the disease it causes is deepening, and the astonishing international collaboration behind the search for a vaccine and a treatment, nothing is guaranteed. Except, that is, the need to fall back on the one tool that we do have to fight it.
Mathematically, it is possible that we live in a state of control. Citizens abide by social distancing, and we are able to keep the number of infections at a level where the health system is able to cater to them while people go back to work. I would say it's not a hypothesis, it really is mathematically possible.
I think everyone should consider themselves at risk. This is a pandemic. We can't predict in the longer term where it's going to go, but we do know that it's going to be circulating for months and years to come. We are trying to develop the tools to in some way both protect people, treat people, and prevent infection. But I think everyone should really consider that they're going to be at risk, and they need to have a fundamental change in how they think about lifestyle as we go forward in the next few months.
While we watch out to bring you news of breakthroughs, remember to play your part in only sharing credible, proven scientific findings, never dodgy science that spreads